In a quiet corner of an Atlanta school, where footsteps echo softly against worn linoleum floors and the faint hum of fluorescent lights never quite fades, Tiffany moves almost unseen. The janitor's cart glides silently down the hallway as she wipes away smudges on lockers and sweeps crumbs under desks. But during her lunch break, something extraordinary happens. Tiffany isn't just cleaning. She's teaching a little boy to read. And what if, just beyond the door of the teacher's lounge, a man whose fortune could rewrite her story is about to step inside? This is a tale about unseen strength, about kindness blooming in shadows, and about a world on the cusp of change. Tiffany adjusted the straps of her rubber gloves and glanced out the cafeteria window, where the last of the lunchtime rush trickled away. The smell of spilled ketchup and the faint tang of disinfectant hung in the air, mixing into the familiar scent of her daily grind. She pushed her mop against the floor with steady pressure, the squeak punctuating the quiet hum of conversation in the distance. It was early afternoon, but the school still buzzed with restless energy. Footsteps, laughter, the distant scrape of chairs. At 32, Tiffany was small in stature, her skin a deep, rich brown that glowed faintly under the harsh school lights. Her hair was tucked neatly beneath a faded cap, strands escaping in soft curls around her face. She wore the standard janitor's uniform, plain, functional, a little threadbare at the seams, and moved with the practiced grace of someone used to being overlooked. Teachers and students passed by, heads down, eyes elsewhere, rarely sparing her more than a glance. That invisibility was both a shield and a wound. She had lived with it for years. Years ago, Tiffany had dreamed bigger. She'd finished college with a teaching degree in her hands and a heart full of hope. But life, with its sharp edges, had other plans. A father's illness, a younger brother to care for, bills that stacked higher than her dreams. The teaching job she wanted slipped through her fingers, replaced by cleaning shifts and silent hallways. Yet inside her, the ember of that passion smoldered, barely flickering but never extinguished. Every day was a rhythm she knew by heart. Mop, broom, bucket, repeat. The corridors echoed with the sound of her work boots, steady and sure. The faint chatter of children spilled from classrooms. She often caught snippets of conversations, the excited rush of learning she yearned to be part of. But the staff rooms and offices belonged to others, and she was always just beyond the glass, a shadow in the background. Her paycheck, barely scraping $11 an hour, stretched thin across rent, groceries, and the occasional treat she denied herself. The small apartment on the outskirts of town was modest, the walls worn and the air thick with the scent of old wood and memories. She kept to herself, save for a few nods exchanged with other staff, often the ones who dismissed her with quiet jokes, muttering that she was just the janitor, not really school material. But there was one boy who made all that fade. Jacob, 8 years old, with a mop of unruly curls and eyes that flickered between frustration and hope. He struggled in class, the letters jumbling on the page, the sounds tangled in his mind. The teachers had labeled him slow, and some kids whispered behind his back. But Tiffany saw something else. She saw potential. She saw a fight. One afternoon, as the bell rang and classrooms emptied for lunch, Tiffany noticed Jacob sitting alone by the lockers, a battered book clutched in his small hands. His brows were furrowed, his lips moving silently as he tried to sound out the words. Something in the way he hesitated, the way his eyes darted nervously, pulled at her heart. She wiped her hands on her apron, hesitated a moment, then approached quietly. "Hey, Jacob," she said softly. He looked up, startled. "Oh, hi, Ms. Tiffany. Mind if I sit?" she asked, lowering herself onto the bench beside him. He shrugged, eyes wide. Want some help with that? She offered, nodding toward the book. Jacob bit his lip but nodded slowly. And so it began. During her lunch breaks, Tiffany would find Jacob in that same spot. Together, they sounded out letters, traced words with fingers, and slowly, the jumble of letters started to make sense. Tiffany's voice was gentle but steady, patient beyond measure. She wrote words on scraps of paper, made up little games, celebrated every small victory. But inside, doubt gnawed at her. What if someone saw? What if they told her to stop? This wasn't her place. She was just the janitor, not a teacher. The rules were clear. She was to clean, not interfere. Yet, every time she watched Jacob's eyes light up with understanding, every time he read a word aloud without stumbling, she knew she couldn't quit. The school was a small world with big hierarchies. The teacher's lounge was a fortress of whispered judgments. The principal rarely smiled, and the other staff often treated Tiffany as invisible. She's overstepping, some muttered when they noticed her lingering with Jacob. She should stick to her job. Tiffany felt the weight of those looks, the coldness in passing conversations. But she brushed it off, her resolve hardening like the polished floors she cleaned. One day, as she was kneeling beside Jacob, helping him sound out a tricky sentence, a shadow fell over them. Mr. Roberts, the veteran teacher known for his strictness and sharp gaze, paused at the doorway. He cleared his throat softly. Tiffany's heart skipped. She straightened up, wiping sweat from her brow. Mr. Roberts didn't say anything immediately. He just watched, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, a faint smile cracked his usual stern mask. "You've got patience," he said quietly. Tiffany blinked. "Thank you, sir." Jacob looked up, a shy grin spreading across his face. Mr. Roberts glanced around, then stepped inside. "Mind if I join?" The tension in Tiffany's chest loosened just a bit. For a moment, the school felt different. Less cold, less rigid. The unseen was becoming visible, and somewhere deep inside, Tiffany dared to hope. The hallway outside the classroom was filled with the usual midday clamor. Lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking against the polished floors. The low murmur of students drifting like restless waves. Tiffany leaned against the chipped wall, the worn rubber soles of her shoes pressing lightly against the linoleum. Her mop bucket sat forgotten beside her as she watched Jacob struggle again, his finger hesitating on the page like it was a mountain to climb. She could feel the eyes, not all of them kind. The whispers followed her like shadows. That's not her job. Why is she wasting time with that kid? Some teachers tossed their disapproval in glances sharp enough to cut through the noise of the school. The principal, Mr. Davis, had made it clear in a rare meeting that helping students was for certified teachers. Janitorial staff should focus on their duties, he'd said, voice clipped and cold. Tiffany tucked a stray curl behind her ear, fingers trembling just a bit. The risk was real. Lose her job, lose her stability. Yet every time she saw Jacob's eyes light up when he sounded out a new word, every small smile that broke through his frustration, the fear faded, just enough. One afternoon, she sat on the cracked linoleum, their backs against the lockers, Jacob's little hands clutching a worn copy of Charlotte's Web. "Try this sentence again," she whispered, voice steady. The warm sun shone brightly on the barn. "Say it slow." Jacob blinked, swallowing hard. The warm sun shone brightly on the barn. His voice was shaky but sure. Tiffany's heart swelled quietly. That's it, she breathed. See? You did it. Jacob looked at her, eyes wide and hopeful. You really think I can get better? She smiled, the corners of her mouth trembling just a touch. I know you can. But the system around them didn't want her to believe that. It was Mr. Roberts, the history teacher with the ironed crease in his pants and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, who first saw them. At first, Tiffany thought he might tell her to stop. She froze one day when she caught him watching, his lips pressed into a thin line. The silence between them was heavy as dust in the afternoon light. You're helping him with reading? He finally asked, voice low, cautious. Tiffany nodded, swallowing a lump. During my breaks, I can't just watch him struggle. He stared for a long moment, then sighed. You're risking a lot. I don't have much to lose, she said softly, looking down at her worn shoes. Mr. Roberts shifted his weight, the tension between duty and empathy flickering in his eyes. This school's got rules. If anyone finds out, I'll deal with it, she cut in, her voice firmer than she expected. That moment hung between them, fragile and uncertain. Then, surprisingly, he nodded slowly. Okay, but be careful. The weeks that followed were a mix of quiet victories and mounting pressure. Gossip floated through the halls like dust motes in the sunlight. Tiffany's playing teacher now. Bet she's aiming for more than just cleaning floors. The words weren't always kind, but some students began to notice. Jacob's classmates gave him curious looks, and a few even asked to join during lunch breaks. Inside, Tiffany felt the weight of the watchful eyes, some heavy with suspicion, others with quiet admiration. Her routine became a balancing act. Clean the hallways, help Jacob, avoid the gossip. She stayed late some evenings, grading papers she had no right to touch, preparing materials she had no official access to. One afternoon, the school's old clock chimed 3 times. Tiffany and Jacob were bent over a tattered workbook, their heads close together. She traced a word with her finger. Now you say it. Jacob's lips parted slowly. Day. Exactly, she said, smiling. You're getting stronger. Before she could breathe, the door creaked open. Mr. Roberts stepped in, the sharp lines of his face softened. May I? He asked, nodding toward the book. Tiffany hesitated but stepped back. He knelt beside them, adjusting his glasses. Let's try this together. Jacob's eyes flicked between them, confusion and excitement mingling. As they read, Mr. Roberts's voice was calm, patient, not the strict tone Tiffany had known. The small shift surprised her. When Jacob stumbled, Roberts didn't scold. He encouraged. Later, as they closed the book, Tiffany saw something different in Mr. Roberts's eyes. A flicker of respect, maybe even hope. After he left, Tiffany sat back against the lockers, heart pounding. The risk felt smaller somehow, like a door opening a crack in a heavy wall. But it wasn't just about Jacob or her anymore. The school was changing, even if slowly, even if reluctantly. And deep inside, Tiffany felt a quiet fire start to grow. Jacob's reading improved with each day, the letters and sounds slowly untangling themselves in his mind. His confidence grew, visible in the way he straightened his back, the way his laughter came more freely. The shy boy who once hid behind his hair now stood a little taller in the crowded hallways. One evening, as the sky outside dimmed to a bruised purple, Tiffany sat at the kitchen table of her small apartment, surrounded by scattered books and handwritten notes. She folded a paper carefully, her hands steady despite the exhaustion pressing in her bones. The hum of the city seeped through the cracked window. Distant horns, the chatter of late-night passers-by, the occasional siren's wail. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from Mr. Roberts. "Keep going. I'll support you." She read it twice, the words sinking in like warm rain. No promises, no fanfare, just a simple lifeline. That night, Tiffany dreamed of classrooms filled with light, of children's faces glowing with understanding, of her own reflection no longer blurred by shadows. The next day, the school buzzed louder than usual. Parents gathered for a meeting. Teachers whispered behind closed doors. And in the midst of it all, Tiffany carried on. Quietly, stubbornly, with a heart full of hope. Jacob's name was called during the assembly, and the room hushed. He stepped forward, clutching a book, and read aloud, with a voice clear and steady. The applause was small but sincere, and Tiffany felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. Later, in a quiet hallway, Mr. Roberts approached her again, this time with a small stack of reading materials. "For Jacob," he said simply. "And for you." She accepted them, fingers brushing his briefly. No words were needed. The invisible woman had become something more, a beacon in a place where light had been scarce. And somewhere beyond the classroom walls, the world was starting to notice. The auditorium lights dimmed to a soft glow, casting long shadows across the faces of parents, teachers, and students gathered in the worn seats. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper, mingled with the subtle trace of fresh flowers placed near the stage, a small gesture for the evening's occasion. Tiffany stood just off stage, the hum of whispered conversations brushing against her like a breeze she couldn't quite catch. Her hands clenched the old janitor's badge pinned to her uniform, the cold metal grounding her amid the nervous flutter in her chest. The story she never imagined telling was about to unfold in front of everyone. Mr. Roberts stepped up to the microphone first, his voice steady but warm. "Tonight, we recognize a remarkable courage and kindness that has quietly transformed our school. Tiffany, our janitor, took it upon herself to help a student struggling with reading, not because it was her job, but because she believed in him." A murmur rose through the crowd, some skeptical, others moved, and Tiffany felt her heart pound against it, her ribs like a drum. She stood a little straighter, feeling the weight of years spent invisible press down, then lift in waves. No one spoke yet, but the silence held a fragile tension, waiting to be broken. "Jacob," Mr. Roberts continued, nodding toward the young boy standing beside Tiffany, "has made incredible progress. His confidence has soared, and today, thanks to Tiffany's dedication, we are proud to say he is one of our most improved readers." Jacob's shy smile was bright enough to light the room. Tiffany's eyes flicked to his, the memory of their quiet afternoons spent with worn books and whispered encouragements washing over her like a tide. When Mr. Roberts finished, the room erupted into applause, some hesitant, some enthusiastic, but it was genuine. Tiffany's lips trembled as she stepped forward, the badge still clutched in her hand like a talisman. For the first time, the invisible woman was seen. Later, as parents and teachers mingled in the hallway, the whispers changed tone. "She's amazing," one mother said softly. "I never noticed her before, but now." Another teacher nodded. "We've underestimated her." The school was shifting. New programs were proposed, focused on helping students like Jacob, supported now by a small fund inspired by Tiffany's work. She was offered a promotion, a role as assistant teacher in the very classroom she had longed to join. Her uniform was replaced by a simple badge of her new position, but she kept the old janitor's badge pinned next to it, a quiet reminder of how far she'd come. The chipped lunchbox she carried every day, once just a container for her modest meal, now symbolized the care and generosity she poured into every child she helped. Jacob thrived, no longer the boy who struggled to read aloud, but a confident student who inspired others to believe in themselves. Tiffany watched him grow with a pride deeper than any words could express. The story spread beyond the school walls, reaching local news and community leaders. A scholarship fund was established to support children facing learning challenges, and Tiffany found herself at the heart of a movement she never imagined leading. One afternoon, as she packed up her lunch in the sunlit staff room, a voice broke the quiet. "You know," Mr. Roberts said, smiling softly, "you didn't have to be someone famous to change the world here." Tiffany looked up, her eyes steady. "You don't have to be important to do important things," she replied. They shared a quiet moment. No grand speeches, just the understanding that real change often begins with small acts of kindness and courage. And in that unassuming school in Atlanta, where footsteps once passed by without notice, a janitor had rewritten not just a boy's future, but the future of many. The world had finally seen her.